Hi everyone. So I have nothing to talk about except that, you know what? I just decided to do this show. Something that I did. Thought of, a story that is somewhat religious, horror related, talking about sex, a man sensitive and a virgin who's having a hard time and kills and wants to murder his enemy, who he believes is an absolute devil. And the next morning at Richard's house, a sense of melancholy fills the air as Richard watches his girlfriend Kayla prepare to leave for spring break. It's clear that he's not ready to say goodbye, and the moment is emotionally changed. The moment is emotionally charged. As Kayla approaches him with a bittersweet smile, she softly says, "So, I guess this is goodbye." Richard's response is a quiet, "Yes," but it's clear he's struggling to hold back his emotions. The sound of the car honking outside only heightens the reality of her departure. Kayla gives him a final, heart-wrenching reminder, "Don't forget me," before rushing downstairs to join her family. Richard watches her leave, his heavy heart, as the car pulls away, taking her out of town and away from him for the time being. The weight of the separation hits him harder than he anticipated, and he's left standing there, unsure of how to process the sudden loneliness. Meanwhile, Rachel Witter, and Ryu Kenshin, Shadow, are staying at Richard's house. As Richard stands frozen in the doorway, Rachel notices the tears in his eyes and immediately senses something is wrong. With concern in her voice, she calls out, "Richard, are you all right?" Richard turns to her face, to face her, but words fail him. Instead, he just looks at her, the tears spilling over, unable to hide the pain he's feeling. Without saying a word, he rushes upstairs to his bedroom, the sound of his footsteps echoing through the house. Once in his room, the emotional weight of the moment overwhelms him, and he collapses onto his bed, sobbing uncontrollably. Rachel stands there for a moment, unsure of how to help, but understanding that sometimes words can't fix the hurt someone is feeling. Later that day, about 30 minutes after Richard's emotional breakdown, he slowly makes his way downstairs to the kitchen. His face is still red from crying, and the weight of the morning's events lingers in the air. As he enters the kitchen, Ryu, who has been trying to stay out of his way, notices Richard and immediately asks, "Hey Richard, are you feeling better?" Richard hesitates for a moment, rubbing his eyes and trying to compose himself. I guess, but he trails off, unsure of how to express the emptiness he feels without Kayla around. It's a moment of vulnerability, and before he can say more, Ryu steps forward, his ninja training allowing him to sense Richard's inner turmoil. Without saying another word, Ryu pulls Richard into a tight, unexpected hug. It's a gesture of understanding, not just as a fellow man, but as someone who recognizes the pain of his friend's heart. Richard freezes for a moment, unsure of how to react, but then the warmth of Ryu's embrace settles over him, and the comforting presence of his friend begins to soothe the raw ache within. Ryu quietly whispers, "It's okay," his calm demeanor offering the reassurance Richard so desperately needed. It's a simple phrase, but in this moment, it feels like the world has slowed down. And, for the first time today, Richard feels a slight sense of peace. After a few seconds, Richard pulls away slightly, wiping his eyes, and gives Ryu a small, grateful nod. The words might not have been enough to fully heal the pain of missing Kayla, but in this simple moment of support, Richard realizes that he's not alone. His friends are there for him, and that matters more than he could have imagined. The shift in Richard's demeanor after his emotional breakdown becomes even more pronounced as anger begins to consume him. The sense of loss and betrayal over Kasumi's assault, combined with his grief over Kayla's absence, fuels a darker part of him. As he stews away the injustice Dean caused, Richard's thoughts grow increasingly vengeful. His once protective nature turns into a burning need for retribution. A desire to make Dean pay for the pain he caused, not just to Kasumi, but to Richard himself and everyone around him. The rage in Richard's eyes is undeniable, a fire that grows with every passing moment. The thought of seeing Dean suffer becomes his singular obsession. In his mind, no punishment is too extreme. His hatred clouds his judgment as he begins to plot a way to destroy everything Dean holds dear. The first target in Richard's plan is Zoe, Dean's girlfriend. Consumed by blind rage, Richard lures her into a trap, his hatred for Dean morphing into a brutal act. In a fit of violence, Richard takes Zoe's life, and the horror doesn't end there. He strips her naked, leaving her bloodied and violated, before hanging her lifeless body from a tree, his twisted way of sending a message to Dean. It is an act of cruelty that shocks even Richard. But in his vengeful mindset, it's justified. After Richard, covered in blood and shaken by his actions, retreats to a nearby swing, the cool air does little to calm him as he sits in silence, staring into the distance. The swing creaks as he slowly moves back and forth, his mind racing with dark thoughts. What was once a simple quest for justice has now spiraled into something far more dangerous. Richard, now fully immersed in his rage, is no longer the same person. The line between right and wrong has blurred beyond recognition. At this point, the weight of his actions begins to settle in, but it is too late. Richard has crossed the line, and his thirst for vengeance is only growing stronger. His descent into darkness has begun, and the consequences of his choices will haunt him forever. Here's the rest of the story. My mouth is sorry. Okay, for some reason the AI, suddenly has shadow be called by girl pronouns. Female pronouns, I mean. This is my favorite part. Okay, that's all for this video, and I hope you enjoyed it or not. Stay safe. Bye.